Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Gaurav and today we are talking renting versus buying. We keep hearing that renting is better than buying, so let's discover together if that's always the case. The goal of this video is simple. Does renting really win the case, or is there any scenario where buying a house can make us richer? Now, before we jump to my Excel, let's understand the problem a bit better. The reason this question of renting versus buying exists is because buying a home is usually more expensive than renting. But the key reason is not that. The key reason is we all think that if we rent, then we can invest the difference in the stock markets and maybe become wealthier in the long run. So the real question isn't renting versus buying, but it's more nuanced. It's renting with disciplined investing or without disciplined investing versus buying a property. So with that thought, let's go to my Excel and let's look at some numbers. All right, so here we have these 5 scenarios, which is renting with no investing. So in this scenario, we basically, rent and do not invest our money. Then we have renting with investing. So we are renting a property for the next 20-30 years and we plan to invest our money every month for the next 20-30 years. And then we have these buying scenarios where if we are buying a property that has no rental income versus we are buying a property that has a rental income versus a magic scenario that I will discuss at the end. So let's look at these. All right, so let's go to the input sheet. Now here, there are a number of inputs here. All the values that are colored in blue are to be inputted by us or by you in this case. And we have all of these inputs categorized across various categories and we'll go through them one by one. So let's start at the beginning. So first and foremost is the time horizon. So this is basically the number of years for which analysis is being done. It can be done up to 30 years. I'm taking 30 years here. And the reason for 30 is most amortization right now in Canada is happening for 30 years. Then comes inflation. What is the targeted annual inflation that you expect the country or Canada in our case would experience over the next 20-30 years or over the period of analysis? Usually this is 2%. The bank's Fed targeted at 2%, but we're going to take it as 3% just to be on the conservative side. So economically, we are expecting the country would not be in the best position. All right, moving on. Now there are 2 scenarios because as we discussed in the results sheet, there are a number of scenarios that we'll be doing. There is a scenario where we are buying a home that has a rental income and then we are buying a home that does not have a rental income, just so we can compare all the different scenarios. So in this case, we look at ownership inputs for the scenario where we are buying a property that has no rental income. So the home price is purchase price of the home. I've assumed this to be 850,000 because in GTA, you'll get a property that has no rental for around $850,000. Then we're looking at down payment, assuming a 10% down payment, you're free to modify this, and then an annual rate of interest on your mortgage. Now here in this particular Excel, only a fixed rate is assumed. So you can put in any particular rate, 3.5, 3.2, 4, 5, 6, whatever. But then that rate is what has been assumed on an annual basis for the entire period of analysis. In my case, I've assumed it to be 4%, assuming that it's going to be average. Even if I've taken let's say a variable mortgage, then 4% is what the average annual rate would turn out to be is my assumption. You can put any value here. Amortization, again, for a first-time home buyer, this is going to be 30 years. So it's just best to put 30. All of these values are calculated on its own. Property taxes assumed to be 0.5% of the purchase price. Annual maintenance of the property is assumed to be 1% of the purchase price. Home insurance generally ranges in the $80 to $150 per month range, but I've assumed it to be $200, again, on the conservative side. Closing costs, which would be about 2% if you're buying a home outside of Toronto. So this is going to be the cost to buy a home in addition to the down payment. This includes your legal fees, land transfer tax, title insurance, and many other things. This particular field is basically, do you want to sell the property you're buying at the end of the time horizon stated above? So after 30 years, are we analyzing that we are going to sell this property and then how much money are we left with in totality? Or a scenario where we're not going to sell the property and then how much money are we left with at the end of 30 years? The only difference this thing creates is the selling cost. Basically, how much money do we think we're going to be losing when we sell the home? That's about it. In this scenario, right now I've put in 5%. So the cost to sell a home is going to be 5% 30 years later. That's an assumption that I'm making. And then finally, the expected home price growth. Generally, real estate appreciates about 3 to 4% year on year. So I've assumed 3% here. You're free to change it to whatever percentage you want. This will be used to calculate the value of the home you buy 30 years later. And 3% is a safe choice. Now, Similar ownership inputs, but here we are assuming that we are buying a property that has a rental income. Now again, in the greater Toronto area, for $1 million, you should be able to find a property that has a basement already built in that you can rent. Again, assuming a 10% down payment, a 4% annual interest, 30 years of total length, all of these are calculated on its own, which is your down payment, loan amount, including default, mortgage, insurance. If you obviously change the down payment in both places to 20%, your mortgage insurance will be zero. Right now, it's not zero. Then we have the monthly mortgage calculated. And now this is the expected rental income from the basement in year one. So if you're buying, let's say, a home in Mississauga and we expect the basement, one bedroom basement apartment to provide us $1,500 per month, that's what we input here. If we expect something else, you put that there. This calculates your net mortgage by subtracting the basement income. And then you have, again, property taxes, maintenance, home insurance, all of those things. Closing costs, again, 2%. And same thing, do we want to sell the home or not? And selling costs and home appreciation. Now we're on to the renting inputs. Basically, what is the per month rent you would be paying if you lease a particular property? So in year one, month one, we assume a $3,100 rent for a property that is suitable to our lifestyle. And we assume a 3% year-on-year growth on the monthly rent that we'll be paying. You can change this number to anything. 3% again is more or less in line with inflation. That's why I've kept it 3% here, but you can change it. Lastly, when you'll be making the stock market investments, if you're renting or wherever the money is coming from, and we'll talk about that in different scenarios, what is the annual interest return that you expect your capital to gain over a 30-year period? So if you're index investing, buying VFV, VOO, something like that, over a 30-year period, what do you expect will be the per year interest return? I've assumed 8%. It's a very safe assumption to make. You can modify it if you want, but 8% I think is a good number. And lastly, this is the discipline slider, behavioral or discipline slider. If you rent and you do so for a 30-year period, do you think you will be able to invest the difference between your rent and the potential mortgage had you bought a home? The difference between the two every month for a 30-year period? If your answer is yes, it's going to be every month, then you can put it as 100%. If you think, no, you're not going to be that disciplined, life is going to get in the way and you won't be able to do it 100% of the time, then you can change it to 70%, 60%, 50%, whatever. So basically, if you rent for $3,100 and had you purchased that similar property and maybe the mortgage for that property was $4,100. So there's a $1,000 difference. If you think you'll be able to invest $1,000 every month for 20, 30-year periods, put it as 100%. If you think no, life is going to get in the way, it might be $500 some month, it might be $700 some month. Some month you might add $100 or so extra. But on average, it might come out to be 70%. So let's say $700 every month out of the 1,000 that you were supposed to do for a 20, 30-year period. So it's basically how much discipline do you think you have to invest the money that you will save if you continue to rent forever? All right, so the first scenario is renting with no investing. Now, in this particular scenario, this is going to be a pretty simple scenario because the assumption is you're going to rent all your life and you're not going to make any investments. So it's pretty easy to understand. To rent a particular property, we start with $3,100. That was our input. And the rent on every year on a monthly basis keeps increasing with the percentage that we had again entered in the input file. This gives us the annual rent. And once we have the annual rent, this particular column tells us how much money would we have lost or paid in the mortgage were we buying a similar property, were we to buy a similar property. Now, the difference between these two figures is what we are supposed to be investing. This is a scenario where we are doing no investing whatsoever. So our, investing is zero. Our end portfolio return is also zero. And pretty simple, we just end up losing all the money we pay in rent. We make no money whatsoever in our portfolio because we did no investing. Simple, straightforward. This is the worst scenario. All right. This is a scenario where we are analyzing what would happen if you were to invest in a disciplined manner. And we are assuming 100% discipline as per our slider here. If you invest in a disciplined manner, every month, the difference between your rent, which is your monthly rent of $3,100 that we had assumed, and the mortgage you would end up paying on a property of similar size. So here the annual rent comes out to be about $37,000, which is just, monthly rent multiplied by 2. You have your monthly mortgage multiplied by 12 coming out to about $60,000. And then the difference comes out to about $23,000. Now, Every year you're going to have some amount of money, that is the differential between your rent and your mortgage. The difference is something that you would be investing every year, and that is what's happening. Every year you invest this particular amount, and you end up getting some amount at the end of the year, and cumulatively, because you've been investing every year, this amount keeps increasing over as the time goes by. Here in the years 26 to 30, you have zero as the investment amount, because inflation or your year-on-year rate at which your rent increases catches up. Your rent is expected to keep going up based on inflation or some other rate that we, which is 3% is what we have assumed here. So eventually there will come a time when your mortgage is less than your rent, in which case you are not really saving any money. There is no differential, which is why you see that the difference of annual investing keeps decreasing and eventually gets to zero, because your rent is more than the mortgage that would have been at that particular point in time. Now, coming to the results section, that's a lot of numbers in the computation section. Coming to the results section, we see that if we had to buy a property, there would be some down payment and closing costs we would have to put up. So that would be about $102,000. So we are going to invest that lump sum money as well, obviously, for a 30-year period. And then we are going to make that per month, per year investment that we discussed in this table. And both of those investment returns. So the first is investment return if you invested the lump sum capital. And the second is the investment return if you invested the difference between your annual rent and yearly cost of owning a home. So we have the value of that, and the total portfolio value. So basically what you will have at the end of the 30-year period is about 2.8 million is what you're going to have if you rent and invest in a 100% disciplined manner. So that's a pretty amazing scenario at the end of 30 years. All right. Now let's compare this with buying scenario. So what would happen if you were to buy a property that had no rental income? So going back to the input sheet, we remember that when we had assumed that if you're buying a property without a rental income, you're buying it for $850,000. So, and the beginning loan came out to about $788,000 because of CMHC insurance and all of that. So we have a beginning loan here, and we have the interest and principal component of our first payment. The first payment being $3,765 per month. That's your mortgage. This is the interest component. This is the principal component, and how much loan is left after you've made that payment. So we have years and months. So till year 30, we're going to do this analysis for every month, 1 to 12. The months keep going on per year. So we are doing this analysis on a monthly basis. Now, we have the home value. We have assumed that the value of the home will also increase year on year. So after every 12 months, this value will increase by whatever rate we've assumed in the input sheet, which is 3% in our scenario, which is a good rate to assume on average. Year 2, month 1, we have the home value increasing by a certain amount. That's 3%, and that'll keep on happening. Your home value will, as you can see, keep increasing. This is the column, G is the column. It'll keep increasing as time goes by. Now, then we have the home equity. Now, home equity is basically whatever value of your home you have plus the loan minus the loan that's basically pending. So as the value of your home keeps increasing, and as you keep paying down your mortgage and your loan decreases, the value of your home or the equity you have in the home will keep increasing. As you can see, this number is continuously increasing as time is going by. Now, there is no rental income in this scenario, so the rental income is assumed to be zero. So you're not basically saving any money by putting the property out on rent. So you're basically not investing any money, because the entire scenario is you're investing the money you save by renting the property. You're not renting the property. So all your capital that you've allocated for the home is just going to pay or take care of the home. Some home expenses have been assumed. Now, a lot of things go in the home expenses bit, such as property tax, your maintenance, your home insurance, all of those things have been assumed, and then an annual rate has been calculated. Then combining all of these, basically your monthly payment, any rental income you get, and the home expenses you get a total owner cash outflow every month. So had you bought a property worth $850,000, including all costs and no rental income, you're paying about $5,000 every month, and this cost keeps increasing as time goes by. So where does this particular scenario land us? So if we look at the results table here, so we see that home value at the end of 30 years is about 2 million, and that's our only asset. We have not invested anything in this particular scenario because there was no rental income, so there is no extra cash to invest. So home value is our only scenario. There were no selling costs because we are not selling this home. You can change that in the input if you want. There is no remaining mortgage at the end of the 30-year period. So our total equity is 2,003,000. There is no portfolio value because we did not make any investment of rental income because we did not get any in this scenario. So the total value is $2 million in a scenario where you buy an $850,000 home and that is not generating any rental income. So when you sell this, we expect to get about $2 million from that particular property. Now let's look at a scenario where the home is generating rental income and we are putting that home, the basement of that home, on rent for a 20 or 30-year period. In this case, it is 30 years. So right off the bat, we see that because we are buying a home that has a rental income, it's going to cost more, which is why we assumed it not to be 850,000, but we assumed it to be $1 million. Now, when the value of that home grows over a 30-year period, we get about $2.35 million in equity. Now, we're not selling the home. I did not put that in the input cost. If we were selling the home at a 30-year period, there would be some selling costs involved that would get subtracted from the 2.3 million and the owner's equity will be reduced by that selling cost. Now, so 2.3 million from the home's equity, and then we have a portfolio value after 30 years of 2.8 million. Where is this coming from? So this is the investment return if you invested the rental income you get from this house. We are assuming a $1,500 per month rent from the basement. And this rent keeps increasing based on the assumption we've put in the input sheet. So 1,500 for the first year, and then 1,545 for the next year, 12 months, and then 1,591 and so on and so forth. Now, the rest of the analysis remains same. Our total owner cash outflow just gets reduced because we have a rental income going on here. And we are taking this rental income and investing it at the annualized 8% return that we had assumed in the input sheet. So when you do that over a 30-year period, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of values here. Collectively, it's 856,000, but when it's invested over an 8% return, you end up getting 2.87 million from your stock market portfolio. You have 2.3 million from your home's equity. When you sum that entire thing, that's $5.2 million at the end of 30 years. If you were to rent the basement of your property for a 30-year period. That's the best scenario out of all the scenarios. I'll just say that right here. This is a great scenario if you're okay to rent your basement for a 30-year period. But if you're not, if you're like me, I am not, then the magic scenario is the scenario that I think is good for me and might be good for you as well. So in this scenario, we're buying a property that has a rental income potential, and we are also looking at prepaying a bit of the mortgage. So what are we doing here? So let's look at the results table just to simplify the results. So the time horizon, again, 30 years. Now we are buying a property with the rental potential. So again, starting price is $1 million of the property. So home appreciation value after 30 years is 2.3 million based on the 3% appreciation rate. Selling cost is 0. Remaining mortgage is 0 because the entire mortgage gets paid off. So owner's equity remains to 2.356 million. Now, in the magic scenario, what I want to do is rent the basement to whoever, but only do it for a 5-year period. So if I scroll this and just go up, the last value here you will see is year 5, month 12. So after year 5, month 12, December of year 5 of you owning the property, you do not put that property's basement on a lease. You don't do that. So which is why the portfolio value, because we are assuming that you're only investing the rental income that you're getting from the basement, you're only getting it for 5 years. So the portfolio value comes out to be far less than the one we saw in the previous scenario, buying with the rental income, because there it was much higher because we were renting for 30 years. So for 5 years, we are okay to have a stranger live in a house in the basement. They pay us rent and we invest that rent, which comes out to about 800,000 at the end of the 30-year period, assuming an 8% annual return. Then what we also do is, there is this prepayment scenario that I mentioned. So what we also do is we save about $350 per month from our budget. And so at the end of every year, year 1, month 12, we make one extra payment. Now, if the first thought of listening to this and making that extra payment is that that's just not going to be possible, you can forget about renting with investing scenario. That is far more difficult to do than this scenario, because you're going to be investing the potential differential of a mortgage with your versus your rent for a 30-year period every month. So $1,000 or so every month in that rental scenario. So if this saving $300 per month sounds very difficult, I assure you that's the discipline to do that is much harsher than the discipline to do this. We save $300 and $350 per month, and at the end of December, year 1, year 2, year 3, we make that one extra payment by the money we've saved the entire year. And when we do that, something amazing happens. Obviously, for the first 5 years, again, we have that rental income going on. But if we keep making this payment, then what you see, if I keep scrolling, you would see that this is the only scenario where if you're not doing anything else, your mortgage gets paid off in the early year 27, month 3 of year 27. Everywhere else, it's going to year 30. Yeah, everywhere else it's going to year 30 because you're making that extra prepayment. You pay off your mortgage 3 years earlier than you were supposed to. So what do you do with that extra money now that you don't have a mortgage after year 27? Well, you use that money to make an investment. So all the mortgage that you were supposed to be, mortgage amount that you were supposed to be paying, you take all of that money and you invest it for the remaining 3-4 year period, and then you get some portfolio value, some investment return if you invest that mortgage monthly amount after the entire mortgage was paid off. So year 27 to year 30, you are investing that amount. Because the mortgage was supposed to go till year 30. Through sheer discipline, you've managed to close it at year 27. So you have a home owner's equity. So at the end of 30 years, you have 2.3 million. That's your home's worth. You have 800,000 from the 5 years of rent that you have. And then you have 231,000 from the last 3 years, that you were supposed to pay your mortgage, but you paid it off early because of the prepayment. So the investment returns from that. Collectively, you end up with $3.38 million. Let's look at the summary sheet. Let's go to the summary sheet to analyze the results. Now, clearly, as you can see, buying with the rental is the best scenario. You make 5.2 million. You make about 2.3 million or so from the value of your home, and you make another 2.8 million because you're renting your basement for a 30-year period and you're investing the rent you're getting every month into the stock market. So clearly, the best position possible. The second best position possible is the magic scenario. You buy a home that has rental income, rent it for 5 years, and make one payment every year. Save that $300, $350 a month. It's not a lot. You save that every year, and in December, you make that extra payment, and boom, year 27, your mortgage is paid off. By the end of year 30, you are left with $3.38 million. Fantastic, and you did not have to have a stranger live in your home for the entire 30-year period, just the first 5. The next best scenario is renting with investment. So this is a scenario where we are assuming that the difference between the rent and the mortgage is something we will be investing every month for a 30-year period. And if you think you won't be able to do that, if you think you won't be able to invest every single month, there might be issues and all, we can change this to 70%. So instead of, let's say, the $1,000 we were supposed to invest every month, we are only investing $700 on average. Right, at the end, it's all analysis, right? So renting with investment, the portfolio becomes 2.3 million. If we do it 100%, it becomes 2.8 million. You can change that to 50%, 60%, 80%, whatever you think will be your level of discipline, and this portfolio value changes. This is the best case scenario. 2.8 million is the best case scenario. And then lastly, the worst, not the worst, the worst is this one where we don't invest anything. Don't do that, please. But the worst in general will be the one where you buy a home that has no rental income and you're bearing all the costs, which means you're not making any investments from the rental income or anything of that sort. This is all not a great scenario, which is why if you're a person who wants to buy a home, for your family or for various reasons, as I do, this magic scenario is something that is really appealing. Renting out your basement is not very complicated in the greater Toronto area. Houses are anyways very expensive, so a lot of properties have a built-in rental. You just have to find one and buy one, lease it out for 5 years, and then just change it, make it recreation after the year 5, so that you can use the entire property for yourself. You're just making that extra payment, and that's it. You own a home, you don't have a stranger living in, and your portfolio value is it's one of the highest in the entire scenario, right? While having the 20, 30, 50 qualitative aspects of owning the home, having it yours, and still coming up ahead in the financial situation scenario. When you see these scenarios side by side, something becomes clear. Renting can win on paper if you compare it with buying a property without any rental income. But even then, you must invest the difference between your rent and mortgage every single month and leave it invested. Now, people mean to do that, but most people don't do it for long. Why? Because disciplined investing is not easy. The market going up or down could impact your decision to invest one month and not invest the other. What if you need some extra money for a family function, or if you want to send some money back home? Or maybe one year you want an extra vacation trip because it is a special year for your family. These and many more scenarios could impact whether you invest every month for a 20 or 30-year period, and that is exactly what you would need to do to have an upper hand financially while renting a property. While buying with a rental income is the obvious choice, but the key winner in my view is the magic scenario. No one wants to rent their home and have a stranger live in it, but if we are okay to make this compromise for 5 years and make one single extra payment for the duration of our mortgage, then we come out ahead. Much better than renting all our life. And then there are the qualitative reasons. Owning a home gives you control. If you want to paint the wall, you paint the wall. If you want swings for your kids, you put up swings. No permissions, no negotiations. There is stability in owning because you don't have to move if the landlord decides to sell his place. There is no drama of finding a new property every 1, 2, or 3 years. If your parents might join you later, or if you're planning for kids, then stability matters. It gives you that peace of mind. And then there's pride. I don't know about you, but being a homeowner fills me with a sense of pride. Knowing that I will watch my child grow up in one home and we will fill it with great memories is a heartwarming feeling. So where do we go from here? Well, if you're that rare person who rents and actually invests the difference every single month and is convinced that you can do so for years, then you'll likely do great. And if you're that person who is comfortable leasing their basement for 20 or 30 years, then financially, you will be in the best position. But for most families, the better choice might be to buy with the plan to implement the magic scenario we discussed earlier. This will give you your own home while having you in one of the best financial situations out of all the scenarios we discussed. If you want to run your own scenarios in this Excel, then the link is in the description below. Feel free to download it and play around. If you have a scenario you'd want me to run for you, then you can reach out to me through the book a call link in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want more deep dive analysis on Canadian real estate or US stock markets. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.